Hi there, my name is Lindsay Schweitzer. I'm delivering my presentation on Dante and Virgil in the Inferno for English 226-300. I already did this presentation once and it completely disappeared, so we're going to hope that this one stays. Okay, Dante Alighieri created the world's most examined and exonerated literary piece when he wrote the Divine Comedy, consisting of 3 parts: the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, about the pilgrim, which is himself, traveling through hell, written around the turn of the 14th century. Written in the later half of his life, following the bitter defeat by religious and political rivals, Dante uses his epic poem to venerate his heroes and cast his personal enemies into an eternity of punishment. It could very easily be said that Alighieri has created an image of hell that persists to this very day, and he managed to fill it with people he hated. In a similar vein, Alighieri writes Virgil into his 3-part book not merely to allow himself the ability to converse and collaborate with his hero, but also to perhaps give Virgil the ability to finally align himself with a Christian God, as well as to pay off his mortal sins and thus be freed from an eternity in limbo. It's certainly something to consider as we look at some of the different ways Virgil is presented to Dante's audience. Not only does Dante allow Virgil and Beatrice, who is a woman he idolized even more in her death and in her short life, the ability to be employed directly by God himself, but they both take turns bearing utmost responsibility for the life and care of this very human being in lands beyond where the living are allowed to go. Dante places his existence in the hands of 2 people he finds to be the most holy and virtuous: his favorite author and the woman he loved and revered from a distance. As author Richard Hughes Gibson says regarding Dante's approval and emphasis in Virgil's place on earth as well as in the other worlds, Dante propelled his Virgil even farther, carrying Virgil's acclaim beyond time and space, expressing it to an audience of no less than the Almighty himself. In the Inferno, Alighieri creates several situations in which Virgil needs to intervene and save Dante from the evil machinations of the denizens of hell. In Canto 9, while traveling to the city of Dis, Virgil protects Dante from the 3 Furies, who are Gorgons from Greek mythology. This establishes once amongst many times that not only do Christian images appear in this hell, but also Greek and Roman mythological creatures. So it's really interesting that Dante felt compelled to pull from both his religious past as well as Virgil's. Anyways, the 3 Furies summon Medusa, and who can turn men into stone simply by looking into her eyes. Virgil realizes after this much time that he needs to intercede in order to keep the pilgrim from being cursed to hell, which shows that, in the beginning of the story, they kind of have a business relationship, kind of a business friendship, but now they've grown to love and trust each other, and he knows that he needs to save him. Not only does Virgil truly care for Dante, but also reiterates the fact that in Dante's hell, there is no clear designation between Greek and Christian mythology. It's important to know that Dante had an entire universe of books from which to pick, from who he wanted to be his friend and guide through hell. Not only did he draw heavily on Christian themes and images, but he also freely mixed in Greek and Roman mythological creatures. And while Dante could very well have just had Jesus Christ himself to act as a safe harbor through which his pilgrim might have journeyed, because it's his story, he can do whatever he wants. He instead chose the man who was both Christ-like but a human being in a pre-Christian era, and that Virgil embodies the very nature of reason, ethics, culture, and intelligence. In a place beyond time, Virgil brings to the lands of hell the only sanity and virtue to be found. His epic poet, the Aeneid, is about a wandering hero who battles against evil and is divinely led to a new land that he can call home after many years of troubles. Alighieri follows this literary blueprint with his own fictional Dante, and by placing Virgil as his guide and friend, he allegorically crowns Virgil with the piety and righteousness which would have otherwise been denied to him through a Christian theology. Virgil's doing this limbo, hell, and purgatory, but it's only due to his lack of exposure to Judaism and Christianity. Why would Dante Alighieri venerate the epic poet Virgil in his own magnum opus? What possible motive could he have had when he chose not to only include him, but to curse him to an eternity in hell, albeit the highest and least painful iteration of it? Some might argue that it's motivated purely out of ego and a desire to be considered by others as a poet who deserved to be viewed in such highly esteemed company. And while Dante describes himself as a roundly hailed and welcomed by a circle of literary giants, he says, quote, "They turned towards me and salutation made, and this beholding did my master smile, and honor higher still to me was paid, for of their company they made me one, so I the 6th part among such genius played." end quote. That's from Canto 9, lines 98 through 102. We can clearly see that not only does Dante consider himself to be worthy enough to inherit Virgil's title as the epic poet for all ages, but he also states that the other widely recognized poets of history were Homer, Horace, Ovid, and Lucan. They all recognize him in limbo, of all places, from his talents, which have apparently traveled so far and wide that they've gone into hell itself, and Dante's made a name for himself that even the dead know about. The only one worthy to be Dante's guide, friend, and mentor through hell is an author who also similarly earned his laurel crown by penning an epic poem that ventured into hell and interacted with some of the same characters in the Aeneid. I'm never going to say this correctly. His main character ventures into hell and encounters Chiron and Queen Dido, and then both protagonists also need a guide to lead them safely through. And also similarly, like the warning over Dante's gate to hell, which proclaims, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter hell," so also does Virgil offer a warning to anyone who willingly travels to hell. And his goes, quote, "The seer began, you Trojan of the gods' line, Anchises' son, the road down to Avernus is easy. Black Dis's door gapes night and day. The work, the effort, is to climb back up into the open air," end quote. And that's from the Aeneid, Book 6, lines 125 through 129. Virgil is not only the literal guide, but he has figuratively cleared a path for Dante, who's been so clearly inspired by this story. A very important moment that illustrates the love and respect that has developed between Virgil and Dante as their journey begins to come to an end occurs in Canto 30. It's probably the most important, honestly. As they are approaching the end of the 8th circle of hell, which has several subdivisions, I guess you would say, Dante becomes somewhat amused by two men who are fighting over who was worse in life and wants to stop to hear what they have to say. He thinks they're really kind of amusing. As the fighting between the two men gets uglier because they're fist fighting and they're screaming insults at each other, Dante is even more entertained. But Virgil says, "Hey, we gotta go. We don't have a whole lot of time, and my patience is wearing thin." Dante does not heed his warning, and he is firmly chastised for wasting Dante is chastised for wasting his precious time in hell on these damned souls. Dante is so ashamed for his behavior and so upset that by his friend's remonstrance that he is rendered speechless. However, the greatest moment happens next. Virgil, in the only moment, the only act of love and hope and charity we found anywhere in the pits of hell, shows compassion for his friend and immediately forgives Dante. Quote, "So I, struck dumb and filled with an extreme craving to find excuse, unwittingly the meanwhile made the apology supreme. Less shame, my master said, would nullify a greater fault, for greater guilt atone. All sadness for it, therefore, lay thou by." And that is from Canto 30, lines 139 through 144. Forgiveness, the one thing every soul in hell wishes they could have, and Virgil bestows it upon Dante without hesitation. This further establishes how Virgil, born too soon to know the loving nature of Christ, is yet blessed with the capacity and necessary qualifications to bestow forgiveness upon his ward. Virgil is human. He's not the Son of God. And yet, in this place of unending horror and damnation, he offers more than a guiding light to his follower and friend. In this simple act, Alighieri has allowed his audience to see Virgil in the same way that he, the poet, views him, a singular voice of rationality, logic, and kindness in a whirling tornado of violence and narcissism. Virgil has not only passed on the crown of greatest epic poet of all time, but he has given Dante a full understanding of what the embodiment of love and forgiveness truly are. With this gift, we see Virgil is trapped here, but he is not made of the same vile, base stuff as the other creatures that they've passed. Virgil is made of finer things and is only there on a technicality. Virgil has a vast amount of characters he could have chosen, but he chose what he considered to be a very human and gifted poet with whom he felt a brotherhood and kinship that crossed time and space. While this is all based on conjecture, and it's ultimately a projection of Dante's wish fulfillment in many, many respects, it also shows the depth of character and emotional intelligence that the Alighieri has to reach back across centuries of time and outfit his version of Virgil as a savior of men in a time before the Christian savior. It's as much an ascension of Virgil to a truly holy man as it is a prayer for the redemption of his soul, and it's brought about truly as only an epic poet as Dante Alighieri could have written. Now, my question to everyone is, if you had to write a story about yourself going through hell or whatever it is that would be like equivocal to you, who would you choose to be your guide? And it can't be a religious figure, so you've got to pick someone that's an author or a literary character or, you know, a celebrity or maybe a movie character, someone to who you think is a great human being and would embody the necessary qualifications. So thank you. Bye-bye.